Welcome and good evening. I don't think I've ever seen a theater where as many people knew each other. So, welcome to the Museum of Modern Art. I'm Leah Dickerman. I'm the organizer of the show upstairs, our current exhibition, One Way Ticket, Jacob Lawrence's Migration Series, and other visions of the great movement north. It's up until September 7th, so please make sure you have a chance to see it. We feel very lucky to have it in the house. Jacob Lawrence came to Harlem in 1930 at the age of 13, and despite the Great Depression, his neighborhood was a vibrant cultural center, one that nurtured a precocious talent like Lawrence's. And one thing that has struck me in doing work on the show is that the places in which Lawrence spent time, Charles Alston's 306 studio, the library at 135th Street, now the Schomburg, the Harlem Y, the Harlem Community Arts Center, all of these were places in which visual artists met and mingled with writers and poets. And before Lawrence picked up a paintbrush to work on the Migration series, he spent months doing research at the library. He read historical documents and sociological tracts, but also novels and poems. So perhaps it's natural that this most readerly painter would create one of the most writerly visual narratives in the history of modern art. 60 images, each with a caption, images plus words in a rhythmic flow. And both the subtlety of Lawrence's formal strategies and his epic ambition speak to us of the impact of the writers in his midst. For well before the Migration series was a subject of painting, it was a topic in writing. There are stories of the fears and aspirations of migrants, tales of the journey north, and efforts to reckon with the particular double consciousness of the Southern-born Black living in the urban North. It was Elizabeth Alexander's great idea to turn the cycle around. Art begets art, she said. And tonight we have a chance to hear 10 of America's most extraordinary poets read and reflect on Lawrence's great series. All of them are children of the migration themselves. Elizabeth is the Frederick Eisenman Professor of Poetry at Yale. She's the author of a newly published and already greatly acclaimed memoir, The Light of the World. And among her many, many accomplishments, she composed and delivered Praise Song for the Day for the first inauguration of President Barack Obama. Working with her has been both a great honor and a deeply cherished pleasure. Before I turn the proceedings over to Elizabeth, let me say that books will be available for sale in the lobby after tonight's performance. And please turn off your cell phones. We're streaming tonight, and it interferes with the miking. And now, Elizabeth.
Good evening, everybody. This is an amazing night, and we have been building toward this for some time. The poet's people come from Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, South Carolina. In some generations, they moved to Akron, Detroit, Topeka, Decatur. The poets today are found everywhere: in Georgia, in South Carolina, in Virginia, in New York, in New Jersey, in Maine, in Pennsylvania. The poets are the descendants of the 6 million or more Black people whose migration constituted one of the largest and most rapid mass internal movements in history and shaped America evermore. By commissioning these 10 great poets to write new poems in response to Jacob Lawrence's Migration series, I imagined that as Lawrence looked to the Souths within him to paint his mighty panels from Harlem, USA, so too these American poets might discover something new in themselves that Lawrence's work would call out. There is the Great Migration itself and the complex and indelible social shifts it engendered. But then there is the art. And that, of course, is what we see here in Lawrence, not documentary or history per se, but rather art born of an extraordinary shift in history carried in the bodies of our people. Art, as well as history, inspires and gives birth to new art, and so I wondered what poems might be born from deep engagement with Lawrence's paintings. The rich African-American ekphrastic tradition might be said to begin with Phyllis Wheatley's To S.M., a young painter on seeing his works, moving through Robert Hayden, Monet's Water Lilies, Gwendolyn Brooks, the Chicago Picasso, The Wall, June Jordan's book-length children's poem, Who Look at Me, Ntozake Shange's word paintings in conversation with art by friends of hers, such as the late Ana Mendieta in Riding the Moon in Texas. And that tradition includes poems by many of our contributors who are here today. Robert Hayden wrote a poem on John Henry that was accompanying an exhibit of Lawrence's John Henry series when it was shown at the Detroit Institute of Art in 1978. But the question that I began with was, why is there no body of poems inspired by this iconic and familiar painter's work that speaks to the experience of migration that in some way most African Americans share? I think the gap is explained in part by the narrative burden on African American visual, literary, and performing art. When Black art engages narrative, it is sometimes undervalued as just a version of the greatest story ever told, doing the work of history instead of art. I also think there is a formal compositional issue that has left a very interesting opening for new Lawrence poems. When a poet engages with artwork that is so narrative, that is so serial, as it is so powerfully in this migration series, there might seem for the poet to be a closed door of entry, as though the whole story has already been told. But what these poets found is that which resided in the millions of words and stories between Lawrence's visual ellipses. We can be fooled by those aspects of Lawrence's work, neglecting to see how it is open-ended, inventive, elusive, and fascinatingly strange. What happens when we look at the paintings one by one and unlace them from their contexts? In the very, very difficult task of choosing which highly esteemed 10 poets to commission to make these new poems, and I really must say, we have, you'll see, we're building a little drama, so when you see everyone come up, and you'll understand that this night, this moment, this reading is a moment in American letters that we won't forget. I think it's important also to say that there are dozens and dozens and dozens of other poets whose voices we could have heard engaging with this extraordinary artwork. Personal history and collective history feed into poetry. So the initiating premise of this extraordinary suite, as Leah Dickerman told us, is that art begets art and influence crosses art forms. So what we have here tonight, what we present, what we debut here tonight is new American poetry, another indelible piece of the American epic that continues to live and reveal itself in our poems. Along with my fellow poets, this project furthered my own thinking, in particular of my maternal grandparents, who began life in Selma, Alabama and Tuskegee, Alabama, and came to Harlem, USA around the exact same time that Lawrence did, with hopes and sorrows, suitcases and stories, some of which I know, some of which my own art may imagine, and some of which are lost forever. So I will call up to the stage the poets who we're going to hear from tonight. They are going to read in the order on the back of their program, and they are the greatest poets we have and my beloved comrades. Yusef Komunyakaa. Crystal Williams. Nikky Finney. Terrance Hayes. Lyrae Van Clief-Stefanon. Tyehimba Jess. Rita Dove. Natasha Trethewey. Patricia Spears Jones, and Kevin Young. Here you go. Wow. So put on your sunglasses and prepare to be dazzled. Thank you for being with us. People will read in the order in the program, and we'll start with Yusef Komunyakaa.
Thank you for being here. I met Jacob Lawrence in 1994, and he was such a humble individual, a robust talent, and a fierce work ethic. The Great Migration. Where's the 40 acres and a mule and the long, great getting up morning? Sharecroppers ask the sun, hidden by cotton and pulpwood. Hawkish agents from the northern factories trekked into Jim Crow twilight between promise and no way as farmers questioned soil under fingernails. The know-how of dreaming in the hot shine of blast furnaces up there. They crossed lines drawn in dust, huddled in trains, racing trees. Blues hitched a ride, washed out of overalls and jumpers, threadbare suits and floral dresses, and flower sack gowns, bleached, translucent by renegade skies at noontime. As the trains jostled along winding tracks, tales of the North Star and rivers to cross, unstitched beneath heavy eyelids, till the electric hum of big cities shone under the night's hard scrabble. A tug of the line, a fish story on the hook snag. The steel mills, foundry smoke and hiss, stockyards, packing houses, Rock Island lined and unending song unwound like a spool of red thick thread in the sluggish dawn. Someone carried the pattern of squares and triangles hand-sewn into a circle and passed down. The unborn rode the rail for free. Some could still see the sanctified taken down to the muddy river. Cuttings, sprigs, and potato vines took root in half-gallon tin cans, facing the sunny south windows. Ragged tunes in their heads flowered, and all night, cabarets and speakeasies up and down the eastern seaboard. Shell shock and mustard gas in trenches followed home some soldiers who danced the Lindy Hop with the newcomers, while others called them breakers, as work took another life in the word and deed of porters, superheroes in the movies or on the radio, forgetting the 11-foot-long cotton sacks as they strolled down tree-lined boulevards and avenues, and ghosts from the old country hung out on street corners, drawn to the drifting harangue of field hollers in the snow. The next reader is Crystal Williams.
I am thrilled and humbled to be here among so many of my friends and these extraordinary poets. I'd like to thank Leah Dickerman for putting this project together, and to thank Elizabeth Alexander, whose inspiration and brilliance, generosity, and grace is a gift to us all. Year after year, we visited Alabama. The past has long legs and is heavy, they'd say, which was a kind of warning. Stay clear of the enormous twisted tree on Tidwell Hill. To we cousins, the tree seemed fabulous. A grand old heron, wings stretching to eternity, the southern vista beneath us so soft and innocent, the grass so dramatically green. We were dazzled. From there, our lives unfurled hypnotically before us. We could be doctors and principals, actresses and mayors. We wanted to escape their watchfulness and murmurings, their relentless apprehensions that seemed to want to rein everything about us in. Our unruly hair, our clothes, our brash voices and sauce, even our childlike curiosities. So we'd climb up, lay on Daisy's ancient red quilt, play word games, dream up novellas about a mutant boll weevil named Bullwinkle, and lament missing summers in Detroit with our friends. Truthfully, we thought they were too Southern, too old school, overly full of moon gloss and doom. In our imagination, the past had no place among us, certainly didn't have heavy legs, was not resting on our shoulders, and wasn't hanging from a twisted tree. But then we also mistook their burgeoning pity for disapproval, the weight, the growing tightness in our shoulders as ephemeral and of only that place. The second piece I'll read is a piece, it's an excerpted piece. The longer can be heard on the audio tour. It's titled Double Helix. It's for my father. 1. At night, my father played piano and sang, his voice our raft on a quiet lake, an island of gentleness. And because gentleness is a choice, I know something. I have told you something essential about my father and the history of Black people in America. And because he looked at my mother and me as if we were divine, brilliant, bright children of God. And because if gesture and spirit have weight, my father's equaled 2,000 blooming peonies, I have told you something about faith and the history of Black people in America. Scientists are full of news these days. We are all rotting fruit laid to ground. In each breath we inhale thousands of humans, collected on the tongues of leaves and the pink eyes of peonies on the powdery backs of pollen. With each draw, a millennia of history enters us, and we cannot control, can only harness whom or what we host. At my 6th birthday party, the parents drank martinis and sangria as we slipped on slip and slides while the desolate beast next door snarled and snapped at the fence, our jubilation magnifying his rage. And because pain will out, and because hatred outs, and because my father had learned some Alabama-born malice, had taught him a lesson to do with mercilessness, the way danger wets the wind, he tore into the house, emerging a gun's trigger. Gun slack the rest of the day to his thigh as we shrieked and ate cake. This is what I was trying to explain to Avi when I sent him that book about the Black migration from the American South. I was trying to say we have cause to care for and track our wounds. To be anything other than enraged or dead is to be a success if Black in America. To become a refuge, a safe harbor, is a miracle if Black in America. His ailing father listened quietly as Avi read aloud passages about the vicious hand of the South and burnings and bodies and swinging. And because his father is a Holocaust survivor, in a moment of lucidity, he said, "Son, why are you reading me my story?" So we, the Jewish son and African daughter, mouths bursting with flowers and fauna, rotting leaves and peonies, and men hanging from the midnight door, and men hanging from the trees, we stood as an ecosystem of gas and fire, double helixes and light, the story of, the choices of, our fathers knotted between us. And because I wanted to touch Avi's face as my own, as if we are divine, brilliant, bright children of God. And because I felt his skin shudder as my own, as if we are divine, brilliant, bright children of God. Because I understood his father's stubble as my own, and because what are we if not our brothers? And because there has always been binding and burning and escaping and enduring, I know no better way to explain the history of humans than to tell you, at night, my father played the piano and he sang. His voice a quiet raft, a raft on a lake, an island of gentleness. And gentleness is a choice, is a miracle in America.
Nikky Finney.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. Elizabeth, thank you for sweetly lassoing us into let's say, a bouquet of black roses. And thank you, MoMA, and thank you, Leah, and everybody. A little backstory. So when I was asked to be a part of this, I received in the mail color copies of the 60 paintings. And my process, one of my ways I work is to hang things on the wall. So I took each page out, Xerox color copy, and on my kitchen wall, placed them each in order and stared at them until I could find a way in. And so I prefer, as a poet, a porthole or a skylight instead of a front door. And what came to me was the number 60, which I read in an interview as I was sitting beneath these pieces of paper that Jacob Lawrence and Gwendolyn Knight Lawrence, his wife, gave to the Black Mountain College. It's on their website, and he talks a lot about the number 60, and he talks a lot about how all of these paintings belong together. And so I wanted to, in a spirit of homage to him and to that number, you will hear, each stanza has 60 words in it. And at the end of each stanza, you will hear numerically the word 60 spoken aloud as exclamation point. When the subject is strong, simplicity is the only way to treat it. Jacob Lawrence. Migration portraiture. North. First time colored could sit on something moving fast for free. Ride the shoe leather of the train all the way up to men standing on Harlem corners with faces like ours. They moving along in a white man's coat, never nodding back our way. Cotton still stuck in their shoes. Zoots waiting to be shipped back to green pastures. 60. South. The snapped, bloody rope the undertaker pulled off my Jack's neck is wrapped around my little girl's depot suitcase like a wedding garter. Tight. Recognize, I tell her. Decamp from the field. Learn to read blood on a rope like an encyclopedia. Then get. Persimmon hat pushed back sideways on her little head. Pencil eyes pointing that away. 60. South. From Mexico to Carolina, they tore through cotton like beetles from the Bible. We human boll weevils sally forth now, ready to land in a new northern land. Push our long snouts down into the bud of something fat and sweet and suck. A 3-lettered poison will help the cotton ride the rails back. What about dusty, black, us? 60. North. Mama hammers hot steel pretending she is a man in a heavy heat suit. Her bald head and sexless hands pay for coal and bread and new books. On the new fire escape, she whispers and smokes, I didn't come all this way to clean and polish another White House. Then asks me to memorize her new northern words, flying and Dutchman. 60. I give you the poet, Terrance Hayes.
All right, how y'all doing? I just was like, why does he have a boll weevil in these pictures? I thought it's only supposed to be black people. And then the idea that a boll weevil could have something to do with so many of us getting north, I found instantly compelling. Thanks, Elizabeth. You're the only person that could get us here, really, I think. I'm pretty sure. Only you. Thanks, Leah. Thanks, everybody, for coming out on a Friday night. Another great ravager of the crops was the boll weevil. Right now, when I should be considering the tracks of black folk slanting in fast-drying tempera, I am picturing a brood of boll weevils migrating to the U.S. in bales of Mexican cotton, or maybe in the bowels of the great Galveston hurricane, or the ears of 4 apocalypse horses, or maybe hidden somewhere on an industrial train traveling from one corner of the South to another around the time sharecroppers and other restless black folk figured it was time to head north. You can probably hear me humming Lead Belly's boll weevil blues. Sometimes an image leads to a tune. The boll weevils Jacob Lawrence painted are little more than silhouettes, but a Southern landowner would have recognized them as symbols of bad luck, bold evil, the money eaters. The boll weevil's scientific name, Anthonymous grandis, sounds like Grand Anonymous, which is as good a name as any for a force that sows trouble wherever it roams. Just a-looking for a home, just a-looking for a home, is a common refrain in a dozen or so different boll weevil songs. They crossed the Cotton Belt, ravaging about 60 miles a year, and reached the Carolinas long before I was born. But I wouldn't know them from the raspberry weevils or the apple blossom weevils or the weevils that share my appetite for corn. I have never talked with the boll weevil, but when I hear crickets cricketing, I know insects and creatures like us basically ponder the same things: solace, survival, multiple genres of longing. I remember how seeing a white woman walking alone a few steps ahead of me one night spooked me so much I slowed and cast a harmless warble into the evening. Just looking for a home. Sometimes, even at a distance, I know what unsettles this country can also unsettle me. Sometimes fear tells us exactly where we're heading. And this next one, 4 Premonitions of Migration. The idea that he had done these and sort of revised them around 94, I think around the time Yusef met him, he sort of changed the wording on some of them. So I just imagined the tradition of every couple of years, every 40 years or so, someone can rewrite the panels. 4 Premonitions of Migration. To grasp the inextricable ghost riding you into the inexplicable future, you must place your lips to panel 13 until you taste something human in the colors of the dirt. To suit our present lives, Ferguson, Baltimore, you must revise the crops were left to dry and rot to read the cops were left to cry and shoot. To perceive the ghost in this particular picture, you must imagine the orb above the field is your eye, waiting for bones or buds to erupt. But let's just head uptown. Someone there is throwing a party for a child named Jacob Lawrence. It's fine to walk without speaking to each other if we are walking beside a river with no bodies in it. I wonder where the land of freedom really is. Not Ohio, maybe Canada, Guadalajara, someday maybe the Congo. Outside, it is always tomorrow. At some point, I'll be boxed and stuffed in a suit I currently mistakenly believe I'll never be caught dead in. 2015, 2040, some other year that's a fistful of symbols. And then in 2115, whoever discovers panel 13 will assume the orb above the field is an apocalyptic spaceship. Migration can, of course, be spatial, as well as mental, spiritual, and temporal. Could Black people be incarnations of time? Yes, because time, like the Negro, carries the past as if it was a sack, holding the Sunday dress, a mother and daughter walking north, sewed from the suit of a corpse left to dry and rot in Dixie. Each of the techniques useful in the transferal of dirt requires work against gravity. The dress seems to get heavier, I imagine, though each night when the ladies stop to inspect it beside a shy campfire, they find it is the same old dress, only a bit less clean. They do not sense you or me in the dirt overshadowing the fields. They do not know that dirt, by definition, is made of history. Coming up next, Superfly Lyrae.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Leah. Thank all of you who have been my inspiration for all this time. Thank you, Lisa Rextoffen, David Apfel, and my former student, Allie Apfel. You all inspire me. If I see something happening which I like, I let it happen. Jacob Lawrence. If it's love flowing freely, I'm ready. Tracy Chapman. Migration. Black is an ardor, color moving as wholeness. Yellow migrates blouse to light, handle to bell. Green migrates button to satchel to wall. Blue migrates coat to sea to night. Sky finds an order. Black is an ardor of smokestack, cirrus, bird flight, blanket, bowl stem. Against spikehead, slipper, judge robe, noose rope, hair. Fatback, sliced on a table, is a block of pink stripes falling open as a story's pages about to be sliced and served. Please, pass me the last bit of summer.
August green glide into overlays of gold, shivers of goldenrod borders against a shearing, sun-gilt pond. Here I sit. See if you can't find Jacob's process in the snake-anxious way I crossed the grass to get at shade. I'm still Southern. In the silver-gray whisper of underleaf, the breeze brings up. Green is a table upon which that narrative of pig and hunger sits until green is the sky at the top of a labor camp stairwell holding the moon, or is green the door, the yellow moon a large bright knob to turn to exit these quarters. If yellow is a question of travel, of red, of orange alerts, key suddenly something from the bottom of the pond, something as simple as caution or coy. At first, one giant one. Then the vibrancy beneath the surface splits, its 40 fish making that orange glide divide. I realize, and one flips its silver-bellied self out of the water, praise my recognition belied. I didn't either. I'm dying to say each soul almost isosceles in her flare, in his onward press, slants in slant rhyme to Mississippi's mouth. If I'm lying, I'm dying to count every dropped leaf, every spent petal towards black potential. Say prehistoric swamp heat, black process burns, a fossil fuel. Say peat, to make a seam, the total black peeling outside St. Louis all week beneath a hard blue repetition. Young black men dealt death unseemly. What's true about a man at 23? He's gone. To books in fall, to studio in spring, gessoing boards with Gwendolyn, with whiting and rabbit skin glue to keep the fibers of a story in his head set when it's cooled and dried. He moves to set its rhythms to a palette, set its tones, encasing colors. What it means to move, prepare. Then let the living thing beneath a scene still breathing breathe, as memory does, alive beneath the egg and milk and pigment. 4 hours in the street one body lies, between dimensions. Jacob's north, whose figment? The finished panels draw him south. He flies. Write about movement where it is most still. Black is arduous. In riot, a raised baton. In burning building, what's behind the cracked window. The SWAT van that appeared suddenly and sat for 20 minutes outside your house drove you from porch to pond. You wondered where a sister might find some peace, though you know you never used the word sister like that. You wrote, where I, sister, might find some peace, then revised it. You're telling the truth, a correction. The I in you corrects. It rises like something from the deep. You're not even at the pond anymore, but still you want to feel outside like you want to write. Rise, overrun, like water. You're in a rush to work some delta in, if you're me. Dirt moves you. In music, the dirty rides you further into this writing. Prof you are, the proof is in the plies, though it's hard to admit. How his what that mean tickles your that means you. Recognize what you do to me, baby, it never gets out of me. You want him in the picture, so write him too through Jacob's rose. Like flames of green crop streak, squash blossomed color, striped soil, go with your ratchet. Negro who had been part of the soil, now going into and living a new life in the urban centers, go with what moves you, what you do to me, baby. It never gets out of me. Reaching 2, 3, 4 pigtailed girls at a chalkboard, stretch, reach. Mark this black, river this, black is an ardor from dirt, summer, scent of slate, scratched up, rock with what moves, black bodies, what you do to me, babies beyond, chalk borders, freely filling it's black, fully free. It never gets out of me.
The next poet is Tyehimba Jess.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for bringing me an occasion to wear this suit my mama brought me. And bringing all these fantastic poets. I'm so proud to be sharing words with folks here tonight and with you on this occasion. This first poem is entitled Negro Migration, 1917, 1967. The North lies waiting with its concrete hustler mouth, with electric boulevard pickpocket hands, with its icicle breath of tenement dreams. The North lies with its clutch of factory-smoked paychecks and its diamond-tooth stockholder grin, salivating for strike-breakers' sweat. The North awaits, its veins sprawled and redlined and gerrymandered, dancing to red summer blues with a pistol on its hip and birth of a nation rattling through its brain. The North lies waiting in its kitchenette cold water flat, its colored-only YMCA, its Harlem Southside Shy East St. Louis alleyways. It took off its white hood and raised a billy club in celebration against Detroit, Philadelphia darkness. The North lies guttered in layaway fine print, sings its down-home gospel of pawnbroker receipts, its morning work song of crosstown subway number runner rush. It's got a walk that leans to the sound of desegregated sidewalks. It drives a hot road car bought with cold cash. It's got a jingle singing about Saturday night in its pocket, a fold in its wallet, and a three-piece suit that washes a man clean of sharecropped hunger. It's got a black pearl necklace of washerwoman knees, and it knows how to paint itself one stroke at a time into burning trash can lullabies of doo-wop. It's got liquor store eyes full of worry, a throat of storefront churches to hum each worry into moan. It left a cotton field down south, along with a warrant for arrest and a promise to never come back. It looks in the mirror each day, slips into its fresh, ironed uniform of tattered hope, and tells the world how it's going to work itself past everything it was ever told it should, it couldn't be, before it struts out the door, deep in every footstep, a music it claims for its own. And this next one is a poem that, in certain ways, was really not meant to be read. It's a blur of text that contains the caption that Jacob Lawrence wrote for panel 22. And that is the kind of play that happens in this rendition I'll try and give you here. Another man done. Another man. Another woman done. Another child done. Another woman done. Another man done. Another man done. Another of the social causes of the migrants leaving was at times they did not feel safe. or it was not the best thing to be found on the street late at night. They were arrested at the slightest provocation. Another of the social causes of the migrants leaving, another of the social causes of the migrants leaving was that at times they did not feel safe. Feel safe, or it was not the best thing to be found on the street late at night. They were arrested at the slightest. They were arrested at the slightest provocation. At the slightest provocation, they were arrested. They were arrested at the slightest provocation. Another of the social clauses. Another of the social causes of the migrants leaving was that at times, at night times, at daytimes, at morning times, at evening times, at noon times, at 11 o'clock times, at any times, they did not feel safe, or it was not the best thing to be found on the street late at night. They were arrested at the slightest provocation. They were arrested at the slightest provocation. They were 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 provocation. They were provocation. They were provocation. Another. They were provocation. They were provocation. They were.
Rita Dove.
Oh my goodness. Now we got fire in the house. Thank you, Elizabeth. Everyone has said it, and we can't say it enough. Thank you to Leah, too, for bringing us all together. I think this whole room should just levitate right now. We'll be fine. I did 2 poems for this, for these panels. I wish I could have done them all. The first one will be panel 10, They Were Very Poor. Say grace. Got a spoon, got a pan, got a bucket for the scraps, got a nail to hang our things on, a wish, an empty sack. Dear Lord, bless our little bit, this table, our beds. Dear Lord, who made us and the world, now can we raise our heads? I also did panel 22. We can hear a different version. Protocol. If they ask your name, give it. If they shout, think, sorry souls. If they shove, remember water. If they kick, remember grain. Stand up inside yourself. Your mama taught you who you are. Thank you. Thank you. I thought I should read this poem because it's the very first poem of a book called Thomas and Beulah that I wrote about my grandparents' migration up north. Thank you. And it's the very first poem, which begins that migration. The event. Ever since they'd left the Tennessee Ridge with nothing to boast of but good looks and a mandolin, the 2 Negroes leaning on the rail of a riverboat were inseparable. Lem plucked to Thomas's silver falsetto. But the night was hot and they were drunk. They spat where the wheel churned mud and moonlight. They called to the tarantulas down among the bananas to come out and dance. You're so fine and mighty. Let's see what you can do, said Thomas, pointing to a tree-capped island. Lem stripped spoke easy. Them's chestnuts, I believe. Dove quick as a gasp. Thomas, dry on deck, saw the green crown shake as the island slipped under, dissolved in the thickening stream. At his feet, a stinking circle of rags, the half-shell mandolin. Where the wheel turned, the water gently shirred. And that begins their migration. I'll end with two interrelated poems based on something that my daughter said. When she was very young, she'd walk around saying nobody loved her but the spring cricket. And I could not get out of her who the spring cricket was and why he was the only one. But these are for her. I hope she carries on. The spring cricket considers the question of negritude. I was playing my tunes all by myself. I didn't know anybody else who could play along. Sure, the tunes were sad, but sweet too, and wouldn't come until the day gave out. You know that way the sky has of dangling her last bright wisps? That's when the ache would bloom inside until I couldn't wait. I knelt down to scrape myself clean and didn't care who heard. Then came the shouts and whistles, the roundup into jars, a clamber of legs. Now there were others, jumbled, clouded. I didn't know their name. We were a musical lantern. Children slept to our rasping sighs. And if now and then one of us shook free and sang as he climbed to the brim, he would always fall again, which made them laugh and clap their hands. At least then we knew what pleased them and where the brink was. The spring cricket repudiates his parable of negritude. Hell, we just climbed. Reached the lip and fell back, slipped and started up again. Climbed to be climbing, sang to be singing. It's just what we do. No one bothered to analyze our blues until everybody involved was strung out or dead. To solve everything that was happening while it was happening would have taken some serious opium. Seriously, all wisdom is afterthought, a sort of helpless relief. So don't go thinking none of this grief belongs to you. Even if you don't know how it feels to fall, you can get my drift. And I, who live it daily, have heard that perfect word enough to know just when to use it, as in, oh hell, hell no, no, this is hell. Thank you. I give you Natasha Trethewey.
Thank you all for coming. Elizabeth, thank you for not letting me miss this. And I'm telling you, I almost did. And I will never forget being up here with all of y'all. I'm going to read two poems, one a very old poem and the other the single poem that I wrote for the Jacob Lawrence Suite. Years ago, I thought I was going to write a sequence of poems about the Great Migration because of my ancestors leaving Mississippi for Chicago. Instead, I wrote a sequence of poems for my maternal grandmother, Loretta Dixon Turnbow, called Domestic Work. Domestic Work, 1937. All week she's cleaned someone else's house, stared down her own face in the shine of copper-bottom pots, polished wood, toilets she'd pull the lid to, that look saying, let's make a change, girl. But Sunday mornings are hers, church clothes starched and hanging, a record spinning on the console, the whole house dancing. She raises the shades, washes the rooms in light, buckets of water, octagon soap. Cleanliness is next to godliness, windows and doors flung wide, curtains two-stepping forward and back, neck bones bumping in the pot, a choir of clothes clapping on the line. Nearer, my God, to thee. She beats time on the rugs, blows dust from the broom like dandelion spores, each one a wish for something better. Thank you. As the crow flies from Mississippi, of the four went three: Hubert, Roscoe, Sugar, not my grandmother, Lee. Patricia Spears Jones.
I too want to thank Elizabeth Alexander for inviting me to be part of this and for being on the stage with these amazing poets. And the poetry suite is just beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you, Leah Dickerman, for bringing all of Jacob Lawrence's paintings back to New York City. I don't write narrative poems, but for some reason, this woman said, you gotta tell a story. And I started with scent. Love. Where is the lavender, the purple scent that says the world is fresh and ready to receive the woman who walks into whatever room she walks into? What room will she enter? How will the female worker smell? Lemon, mint, roses crushed for homemade soap, no place here for the boiling recipe, there is no room. And her extra money, how will she make it? Who will she do for? How will she get there? Will she find her old friends, her lovers? She is lonely. The artist says in panel 57 that the female worker, not Negro, not a migrant, is the last group to leave the South. One woman is her own group. Was she ready to leave or was she left behind, caring for baby, grandfather, brother, sister, cousin, and elderly aunt? Was her garden where the family sought nurture? Were her skills at picking cotton so great the bosses did all they could to keep her? Was there a fourth child not wished for? Much about the South is unseen or not shown. The painter understands the usefulness of obscenity, lynching, hunger, the crops failing, boll weevil, boll weevil. And so we see the cotton ball, but not the bleeding hands that pick. We see the rope dangling. We see the meager rations of meat and bread and the table set, no plenty. Is this the start of a woman's true blues? The men go away, the women stay behind, and everyone is lonely? In many of the paintings plain, she is not seen preparing the meals, cleaning, sewing, packing, clothes to last for as long as they can last in the distant cities of Chicago, Pittsburgh, Detroit. She is not seen crying at the preacher's table or burying her head in the broad chest of the man who gets up before sunrise to make it to the station, ticket in hand. The men knew the hardships ahead. Others were ignorant enough to believe the stories of plenty, work, food, shelter. Women put no truck in these white men's promises. They wanted out of Dixie on a very bad day, wanted out of stuck. She will leave for the north and go to the cities. She will find the church where her Bible meets the preacher's holy hollering and the music sounds as sweet as in the backwoods. She will see the kind of dresses she wanted to make from the butterick patterns at the notions counter, the same counter where she finds the yellow ribbons that tied the braids of the young girl in Painting 21, who arrived early to get on that northbound train. Is this the start of another woman's blues? To journey north and find the men mired? To journey north and find her skills unknown? To journey north and discover an even greater loneliness? The female worker gets that ticket and joins that motion forward. The many shoulders, legs, hands stretched across the painting's frames, counting the rails away, away, away from Dixieland. Head bowed, holding an orange dolly, the laundress is charged with purgation, removing the dust and dirt and stains of city living, the marks of many sins, sex, drink, the opium den. These swirling oblong colors rest beneath her gaze as if she has the power to make this job seem better than picking cotton or hog butchering or taking in washing for the old gentleman who pinches her breast for that extra nickel. Last to arrive north, but first to see the way home, to make a home, put her skillets on a hot plate, shelves her mason jars, full of peach preserves, pickles, taste of home, Chanel spreads on the lumpy mattress, the Chicago Defender on the kitchen table, biscuits rising before sunrise, greens found in an Italian market. She stands in this painting, a cruciform of desire, in a center of beauty, dressed in white, the orange stick her cudgel, her sword, the laundry her step on that ladder to the future. A migrant from the back of the bottom, or a town just big enough for the railroad to notice. Gone to the city and its bitter possibilities, so that church is a hearthstone, an eau de cologne, lavender, roses, vanilla, hints of serenity. The great, the magnificent, the absolutely fabulous Kevin Young.
How's everyone? Good, good. I'm glad Patricia mentioned food, so I don't have to. Biscuits. This first poem is called Flash Flood Blues. Flash Flood Blues. I'm the African-American sheep of the family. I got my master's degree in slavery. Immigrant to the American dream, evacuee, I seen the water ladder its way above me. Swam to the savings and loan, no one home. I've steered hardship so long, even my wages of sin been garnished. Wolf tickets half off, collect call and response. Whenever we pass on the street, death pretends not to know me, though the grapevines say, he's my daddy. Thank you. I want to thank Leah, of course, for uniting this wonderful series and letting us experience it all and uniting us all. I was thinking up here, what a migration of poets you have. And I want to thank Elizabeth, of course. And when I think of her, I think of Harlem and her family there. And so I thought I'd read this poem. It's an ode to the Harlem Globetrotters. You'll remember that the Harlem Globetrotters always played the Washington Generals. And I remember being young and thinking, they always win. It's amazing. So, ode to the Harlem Globetrotters versus the Washington Generals. Because they always win. Because Meadowlark Lemon. Because for them, double dribbling is literal. Because on your finger, your knee, toes, and elbows, the world can spin. Because the ball on a string. Because rubber bands for hands. Because the ball a banner. Because where else do generals meet defeat without blood? Because the best offense is a quick depantsing. Because mercy, not pity. Because the bucket of water tossed on the cries of the crowd turns like tears to confetti. That's it. So this poem is the poem from the catalog. It's called That-A-Way, and it has a quote from Jacob Lawrence, and the migrants kept coming. That-A-Way. You know, when I wrote this poem, I thought of it as a historical poem, a poem about something that used to happen, and now it seems like eerily prescient or current. I don't know if I like that. That-A-Way was walking and then waiting for a train, the 1240, to take us that-a-way. I got there early. Wasn't a train exactly, but a chariot or the Crescent Limited come to carry me some home I didn't yet know. There were those of us not ready till good Jim swung from a tree, and the white folks crowded the souvenir photos frame. Let his body blacken, the extremities shorn, not shed, but skimmed off, so close it can be shaving almost. An ear in a pocket, on a shelf, a warning where a book could go. So I got there early. See now, it was morning and a cold snap, first frost, which comes even here and kills the worms out the deer. You can hunt him then, but we never did want after, no trophy, crowned down from a wall, watching. Just a meal, what we might make last till spring. There are ways of keeping a thing. Then there are ways of leaving, and also the one way that we didn't want. I got there early. Luggage less sturdy, cardboard, striped, black than my hat. Shoebox of what I shan't say, lunch on my lap. The noise the rails made even before the train. A giant stomach growling. A bowed belly. I did not pray. I got there early. It was not no wish, but a way. Thank you.
So we have a little more time left, so I'm going to tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to ask two questions, and you all can address any of the questions of your choice, just to have a little bit of conversation about this extraordinary work, so that this opportunity for all of these amazing people to be together is not lost. I want to also say that, so this is the first time that these poems have been read, and the catalog is the only place where you can find these poems. So brand new living work reproduced in the catalog along with the plate. So it's really a very, very precious and extraordinary book. So I wanted to let you know about that. I wanted also to say that there was a moment when Rita and Natasha were greeting each other and crossing, And I thought, there are our 2 poets laureate. And then I imagined in a virtual pile all kinds of medals and medallions and epaulets and all of the Pulitzers on the stages and the MacArthurs on the stages and all of this. And I say that not to just count prizes, but to say our cultural labor has not always been recognized. And now I want to recognize it. So thank you. And to say also what a joy it is to take pride in every word that you all write. So before we have our little conversation, I just want us collectively to say thank you for these poems. Thank you so much. So, there you are. Will you stand? So I hate to stop this, but let's just take a few minutes and if you all either question you prefer, I don't know the answers to these questions. I thought a lot about what I knew about each of you and your stories and your people, but if you could either speak to your own relationship, individual or familial, to the Great Migration, huge question, and how you came up against that, moved around that, but worked with that in writing your poems. And then the second question is, what you've heard is poems that situate themselves in the historical moment of the migration, poems that press on today, and poems that bring the two together. So you might alternately address the question of history and history of the present tense. So everyone will speak, and in no particular order. So anyway, anyone wants to start. Just sitting, we've got mics here. Okay, Nikki.
I should start?
Yes.
Why should I start? Oh. You know what I was thinking about when I was a little girl in South Carolina, and all the people, some of the people in my family left home and went to New York, and then they would come back in the summertime with really big cars and those orange and black license plates, and we would sit on the porch and we would just think, wow, one day we're gonna go there too. And I mean, you know, that's a visual as a child, watching people come and go and family come back all like, you know, and, you know, we didn't have that in the South at the time. So I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about how, I have to say this while I have the microphone because I might not speak again, but there are so many capillaries and blood vessels in each of our poems. And I was listening to the words repeat themselves and the visuals repeat themselves. And we work, you know, alone. And you would think we worked together. And in a way we did. But when I opened the book for the first time, I was like, wow, that's really stunning. That's all I have to say.
I remember growing up, I grew up in Akron, Ohio, and my grandparents came up from both Tennessee and Georgia. And so I grew up as a Midwesterner, and yet every time my relatives from Cleveland, from Akron, from Dayton, whatever, they would come together, everybody would start to speak with a Southern drawl. It was in our genes, and we had heard it from our grandparents. We knew exactly how to behave and how to act. And so I'm thinking, Nikky, when you were talking about this being kind of in us, it's a gene pool that we're all swimming around in, and we know that, and maybe, you know, maybe I came from Akron, Ohio, but I've got Georgia in me. It's all right, yeah. So.
I feel like that's in the paintings because he wasn't in the South yet. He was researching and thinking about the South, which I found very moving. My family weren't, I don't know, were they stubborn or, we didn't leave Louisiana. So they were just stayed till sort of my parents' generation. And my parents' generation, either you would go to LA or LA. Now you move to Houston. But both sides of my family are from Louisiana, and I think that rootedness is so important. But we moved around a lot, so I feel like I had just missed that, or rather, I was undergoing my own great migration. Every 2 years we were moving. And, but the things that stayed the same were Louisiana, were that home place, as well as that food, you know, that the things you carry, let's call it. And some of it is language, some of it is practice, some of it is the art and the song, and a lot of it is just the food we ate and the things we did that I thought everybody had, you know, fresh figs, preserves in the fridge, or we never had jelly or any, you know, or things that came from Louisiana that were so much part of me that I just thought were normal till I went to like college, basically. I thought everybody had, you know, pepper vinegar. Or, you know what pepper vinegar is? If you don't, you're missing out. So ask somebody.
You know, sorry, Yusef, do you want to go? So I read maybe 2 years ago, maybe it was 2 years ago, The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson, which I know informed Leah's thinking about this collection, and it certainly is one of the 5 most transformative books in my life. And in part because my father, you asked about sort of the present, but also our families. My father was quite a bit older than my mother. He was born in 1907. And I grew up in Detroit, and we didn't have sort of the tangible facts of the South with us, although we had the gesture of the South. And we called Detroit Little Alabama, not quite understanding what that meant, right? And in reading that book, what I realized was that my father was the youngest of 11, which places his parents somewhere in 1850, 1860. So in just 3 generations in my family, we've moved from Bessemer, Alabama, to my father coming up to Detroit to work in Mr. Ford's, which is what it was called then, and playing music to me, who now lives in Maine. And so for me, this collection struck a chord in a way that it suggests to me that we are the past incarnate, right? Like we are walking the past as we go. I was also struck today in listening to all of this brilliance, you know, the current context that we're living in is so relevant to what, I mean, Tyehimba's poem, I was struck, I was thinking about Baltimore, I was in Baltimore. And that suggests to me that the danger and the violence and the compassion and love and the ambition and intelligence, right, and the perseverance of the people, all of those traits move through time. And this is just a circumstance, right, but that the characteristics move through time.
You know, I came here actually to this part of the country in 1997. And living in New Jersey, I kept saying, this is more South than the South. And I said, I kept thinking, I said, well, I should write an essay entitled An Echo of the Great Migration. And what's interesting is that the landscape, I think we internalize the landscape, and that internalized landscape becomes a psychological overlay for how we deal and perceive the world. I felt like being in New Jersey that the South had changed, but the North, elements in the North had not changed. And it has a lot to do with ownership of land. In the South, many of us, we owned land, and consequently, the rituals of the land, getting one's hands into the earth, knowing exactly what, life is about.
I have a slightly different take on this, and maybe it's because I came from Arkansas to this city in 1970. I'm the first person from my family to be part of a great migration. I migrated my butt out of the South because I did not want to wind up being a very unhappy person in Arkansas, probably teaching 10-year-olds and drinking too much. So I came up here to be an artist. And so one of the things about this to me is the idea of this young man making this kind of work based on not only his studies, but his listening to his family and figuring out how to talk about something that important. The idea of wanting to be that brave in his own work fascinates me. I mean, that is the great gift, I think, for a lot of us. But also I want to think about the idea that migration is, the great migration. We're like, as always with black people, we are the first ones out there. But there are great migrations going on in this country right now. I teach people who are part of that great migration. They come from Nepal, they come from Pakistan, they come from Mexico, they come from Ghana. It is unbelievable. We set the pace for all these people. And I think it's about time they understood exactly what that means. And this particular kind of exhibition with this kind of work, these kinds of thinking about it, makes that happen.
So my family too did not leave, and that always disturbed me growing up. So my grandmother and sister, they came up to Jamaica, Queens, and we would spend the summers there. And I always thought they just had more flavor than. So I felt like all the special people left us and went north. And although I'm now in the north, I still somehow think of myself as the southerner who did not quite get on the train, didn't have the nerve to get on the train. So I felt like I lived with that, thought about that for quite a long time. So in some ways, to think about the impact of the boll weevil as I was sort of writing this poem and thinking, oh, it wasn't just that really brave, creative, courageous people left. Some people just left because the boll weevil ended their jobs. And so that made me sort of think again about, well, what about the people who stayed then? And is it simply that we didn't have the nerve to leave? And by the way, I really am thinking about my own immediate family. So the insect, which I think was one of the animals that kept sort of showing up across the poems, in an interesting way connected me back to the notion of land, the notion of like what is impetus, what is it that leads us to these new terrains? Is it always just a pure sense of will? Is it sometimes luck? Is it sometimes environment? And it explains us as still being Southerners in some ways, if that's true, so that I still very much think of myself there in the South, even though I live in the North. Can I ask a side question? I know other people want to talk too. I would also really love for Elizabeth to talk a little bit about some of these things because we didn't get
See, I'm not being a poet tonight. It's delicious letting you all do all of that. But I guess what I would say, you know, my mother is here. There's my mommy. And you know, in being brought up by these amazing Harlemites, and everyone came to Harlem and made this extraordinary culture. And my mother's uncle, my great uncle Spinky, Charles Alston, was Jacob Lawrence's first teacher when he was a little boy in Harlem. And so this was the milieu of New Yorkers that showed me what art was and what black art was, and that was what we lived in. And it was on New Year's Day when all of these people would gather around, and this, to Kevin's point, would eat the things that we all eat in the ways that all of us can speak about the particularities with which the pig and the rice and the greens and the various kinds of peas or beans are made. I would think as a child, so where did this come? Something has shifted. Where did this come from? What is this thing that we just know how to do? And all these black people come into our home and everybody knows how to do it and what to do. That was fascinating to me, being outside of that context. And it really wasn't until I was a fully adult person that I ever actually realized that my mother's parents began their lives in Alabama and came to New York and remade themselves. And that wasn't that they left a bad thing and came to a good thing. You know, it was a complicated thing. But the idea of New York as this place where we also come together with people from the Caribbean and from other parts of migration and black diaspora kind of writ large, and that sometimes it's not until you're in the reflective process of art making and adulthood that you even have occasion to think about where you came from. I guess that's something that this whole project let me think about some more.
I was just gonna say, my dad, Greenville, South Carolina. Strom Thurmond's signature is on his high school diploma. My mom, Claremore, Oklahoma, and then Little Rock, Arkansas. She went to Dunbar High School, the one that was still segregated before they desegregated Central. And growing up in Detroit, I grew up around so many Southern accents, and all my cousins and neighbors. And visiting down to Greenville and seeing the stars for the first time, because you couldn't see them in the light pollution of Detroit. And then going to Chicago and hearing Mississippi accents thicker than Mississippi. When I looked at Jacob Lawrence's work, I was just fascinated with once again, I had to everybody said it, but the fact he was 23 when he made this bold statement with this story of paintings. And now my migration away from Detroit, and all my siblings, my brother and my sister have left Detroit, so that's a whole nother migration that we're in the midst of right now. And still, as I was still dealing with some of those same issues that are making us move from place to place, employment and brutality, etc. And I have to say, actually, if I could, I was watching the DA from Baltimore today. Anybody see the DA from Baltimore go off? I love this poetry here, but I also want to see some more of that kind of poetry too.
I keep coming up today with how absolutely necessary poetry is, thinking about like the present history and thinking about, I mean, for me, during this process, there is no my poems without you all's poems. And it's been running through my head all day, whether, that image of the water thrown out into the audience, transformed into tears, transformed into... Is this, if not, is that better? the transformed into tears, transformed into confetti, but then going down the line today, things. I've been thirsty so long, my mouth feels like parchment, got words written across it that Patricia Spears Jones wrote. And the way in which Natasha in Thrall is going through identity with all of these fantastic conditional sentences, if anything will like kind of make you think about possibility and invention in terms of like humanity and being a person, you know, thinking all day today. I was so glad that you read the event when you got up and started to read it. I looked at Tyehimba and said, "Them's chestnuts, I believe," and that shirring that's in that river is in my poem, you know, in the pond, you know, and the way that Tyehimba has got thinking about, again, identity and the mixing of the voices of Lomax and Ledbetter that creates that identity of Leadbelly that we get of, you know, like so much of thinking about the way that poems open up space for us. In Lighthead's Guide to the Galaxy, I say this all the time to my students. There's that line, "I'd rather have what my daddy calls scrimp." He says discreet and means the street just out of sight. You know, the way that opens up space. When I was in graduate school, around my window in my writing space, I had the words, "From God ain't making no more land." That's why I keep telling you, schoolgirlie, don't walk so high up, not so high up. Take you a dirt road then and look round, remember what all you see prettying up the old trees, 'cause might not be there Sunday week, by Nikky Finney, or thinking today of Crystal, you know, like, you know, who knows what the woman beside me is hearing? What is the rest of that line? We're bound to this one language, tongue-tied to this, you know, one language. Or you said with the, in thanks, this notion of something that moves only when I move, that keeps you safe in terms of, or I look at Elizabeth and she knows, first Afro-American Esperantist, gumbo yaya, lingua franca, you know, in the way that those words open up space. And so that when we think about like the present moment and the present history that's happening, it's not just the despair and the trauma that I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about these people are helping us to find a way out of that, like thinking, like inventing through creativity, like a way for us to be, like a way for us to be smarter than power. Woo!
And that's Thomas Sayers Ellis.
But Lyrae,
that's Thomas Sayers.
after that utter brilliance that Lyrae just laid on each of your heads and my head and all of our heads, we cannot move without saying James Baldwin's name. We have to call James Baldwin's names because James Baldwin said, it's not the politician, it's not the priest. And this is not, you know, if you knew us, we're not tooting our own horns. We're following the lead. Baldwin said it was the poet, i.e. the artist, MoMA. You know, that's the lead. Follow that lead before you follow any lead. And Lyrae, you just laid that out like Alpha Lara Vega of us all. We never leave her out, don't worry.
Well, it seems ridiculous to go back here now after that.
You want one?
Okay. But, you know, so many of us have also talked about the people who didn't leave. And, of course, that's what the small poem I read was about. I'm a native Mississippian because my grandmother of her siblings was the one who did not go. And it was really great to hear Patricia's poem, to think about the reasons that women were last to go or maybe didn't go. But I've also had to think a lot about when I said I wanted to, some time ago, write a poem about the migration because of my ancestors who did go. It was because when I was growing up in Mississippi, my great aunt Sugar, who went, had come back. So she'd retired and built a house and came back home. And so if I look at my family, if I look at my mother when she tried to go to California in the 50s to see her father, she came back and never went again. When my mother married my white father in Kentucky, they had to cross the river, the Ohio River into Cincinnati where it was legal. And then they migrated from there to Canada. But then they came back to Mississippi. I mean, who comes back to Mississippi, an interracial couple, in 1966? But they did. And so it seems to me that my whole experience of thinking about migrating and going away is always about coming back. And I think it has something to do for me also with what Yusef said about that place that is imprinted on me. And that for every reason I have to say Mississippi goddamn, it's home because it made me.
Well, thank you. Once again, we've said it many times, but Leah Dickerman, I started out, maybe we could, one poem, maybe, what about 10? And Leah said yes, and MoMA said yes. So thank you for this wonderful bounty. And let's just thank everybody again. One more bow. Thank you.